Countdown.
Good evening, keepers of the cash. Gary B, the casual comic guy here, and I am joined by my always co-host. We have Rob, who I'm used to having on the other side, but here he is over here. Rob, Fat Stacks of Comics. Good evening, sir. How are you?
We can fix that.
There we go. And how are you this evening?
As usual, tired, but
Oh,
but you
same
can.
here. And of course, our guest of honor for this evening, none other than kicking off Bearded Comic Week on the 1011. And this Thursday on In the Hot Seat with the Usual Suspects, we have Bearded Comic Bro. How are you this evening, sir?
Man, I'm great. You're gonna get tired of me. I feel it. Like two shows in a row. You're like, all right, this is it. But no, I'm good. I can't complain. So things are well. So
Nice. And so I like to ask every guest before we get going, did you have a good time picking out your books?
I
Or was
did.
it hard?
It was the hardest part for me was just trying to figure out like what route I wanted to go. There's so many stories that resonate with me and comics that I love. I mean, I have a lot of comics in my collection, so it was just more of like, what ones are really special. So I was
Super pro.
Hey, you never know. You never know what's gonna pop up. It's just one of those. It's like not the most expensive books, but the ones that mean stuff to me.
Right. And that's exactly what this show's about.
Yeah.
So before we get going, as I like to do, anyone that's catching this on the rewind who doesn't know you, who are you and what's your channel about? Give the 2-minute pitch of Bearded Comic Bro.
Yeah. So I've been doing YouTube stuff now for 3 years almost, coming up here soon. Basically my channel has evolved into I do weekly interviews with comic creators. So anyone from the big two down to Image, Scout, AWA, to Kickstarters, to Unknown. So it's been a wide variety of just trying to interview different creators and, artists or letters or writers, and just kind of see their kind of how they get into, the world of comics and how they create things. So that's something I always like to do. But Gore brings up a good point. I do a lot of content with my wife. We kind of stumbled into that on the show. We did one of those like, oh, see if your significant other can guess this character. It was one of those YouTube trends like 2 years ago or something. We did it, and then someone was like, you should have her quiz you. And so I was like, okay. And then I was just trying to find content, so we just kept doing it, and people liked it, so we just kept doing it. And we're almost at 100 episodes of doing that show. But
nice, gotta love that.
Yeah, so it's cool. So like I create a lot of content with her and try to just make unique content that is stuff that I will enjoy, because comic market is already unique. And so I'm like, well, what, and so we do that show. We do, we find comic book recipes from comic books, and we do a cooking show. She reviews movies and comics, and she's not really in the comics and the comic book movies, and so people kind of like to hear her take on stuff. And she's just really embraced being a part of the channel. And so I'm just blessed that like I can do that with with my wife. And so yeah, a lot of content I create now is with her, and we try to figure out new things and do stuff like that. So I mean, if you want just to hang out and have fun and be goofy, that's kind of the show, and you might learn something about comic books.
There you go. What more could you want? All right, so we're going to do what Rob likes to call Romper Room, and we're going to say hi to the chat. So we got Polkan Joe. Good evening, sir. Comic Journey. How you doing? Brother John Comics. Ignacio. How are you, sir? And we also have Trev, the shipping guru. And we have Dope Comics. Good evening, sir. There was Trev right there. We got Phil Ailing. Good evening, sir. And Mrs. Bearded is the best part of Greg's channel, frankly.
Listen, I take zero offense to that at all. I tell her all the time, I'm like, listen, I'm like, we need to review him. I was like, I talked her into going to see Black Adam, because I was like, you could do an easy movie review and you don't have to prep much. She goes, people don't want to see. I'm like, people want to see you more on my channel than me. So I get it.
Bobby. All right, sweet. Well, that's fun, and that's a cool dynamic that your show that your channel has, because not everybody's spouse or boyfriend or girlfriend supports what they do. Well, and if they do support it, it doesn't mean they're necessarily interested in
Right.
that hobby, so they don't participate.
I love the dynamic when husband and wives or partners are doing the show together, or single cam on together. There's a few out there that are doing it, and every single one of them, it's a pleasure to watch the dynamics and interplay between them. It's far more entertaining, I think, than watching, you know, maybe you know like for example, my ugly mug sit here and open a box or two without any, I'm just talking to myself basically. And so I think it comes across oftentimes more interesting. I'd love to get my wife involved in it simply because she's an older school comic book nerd than I
Mhm.
am, but she's too busy doing other nerdy things.
And this from the guy who just randomly found an ASM 300 in his house one day.
But she did.
Yeah, that's what I meant to say. She did, yeah.
Yeah, but
That's
in
so
all
good.
defense, it was her brother's. But yeah.
So, Greg Bearded, I know that you are on kind of a time crunch tonight. We got to get you out of here by 9:30. So, without further ado, now that everyone's got to meet you, and the new people that are watching this for the first time get to meet you and go to your channel and sub you up. Let's start out with your first book, sir.
Yeah. So, yeah, I gotta do an interview after this. So, I prepped all for it, so we can go right up to crunch time. So, first book I picked up, I figured I had to start out with a Batman book because everyone knows I love Batman. This is Batman Legends of the Dark Knight, issue number 18. This is a Denny O'Neil story, and it resonates with me because it's got Batman and he's rocking a beard. Like, how awesome is that?
Yeah, you don't
But
get bearded Batman much.
you don't get bearded Batman much. But this was one of those really cool storylines. This is a Venom storyline. So there's 5 issues in it. And this is issue 3. It's one of my favorites because you get this story of Batman is struggling he couldn't save a young girl. There was an explosion, she got trapped in rubble and basically drowned in the first issue, and he
Ooh.
couldn't remove the rock that had fallen, to get her above to go. He wasn't strong enough to save her, and so he resorts to taking venom pills so he can get stronger and he can be strong enough to be the vigilante hero that Gotham needs him to be to save people. And just the idea for how much, how important for Batman it is to be able to save people, especially a little girl, and that he wasn't strong enough to do that. It's a powerful storyline, and you see the pills here and here in the bottom corner where he's taking it. This is a series now where it's kind of the midpoint where Batman has to figure out what he's going to do, that crux, and he basically locks himself in the Batcave for like 2 months and has Alfred lock him in there to quarantine himself so he can come off the Venom drug. So it's just it's a heavy storyline. But that's what Denny O'Neil brought to the Batman and to comic genre, which I loved about his writing.
Well,
But
I kind of too. It's cool too because it also reflects on the other thing that's always in the back of Batman's mind, right? He's a hero in a world of people with powers, and he has none.
Yeah.
So just pop some pills, it'll be okay. No, it wasn't okay, and that's the good thing. There's some fallout and ramification.
Right. So
Well, and it humanizes him too, which is nice, right? It adds that, like, even Batman has his dark times where he resorts to something he shouldn't go to.
He has nothing but dark times.
But you know what I mean, like where
Yeah.
he shows weakness in a different way, like a human way, like resorting to drugs or
Right. And in the midst of that, finding his own strength of he is strong, he might not be as physically strong, but I read this as a kid and I didn't get it. And it was one of those when I went back and reread it, I was like, wow, that's intense.
right. Well, that's one of the great things too is when you go back and reread something as a kid, and you get a different viewpoint on it, and you still can see it from when you were a kid, but now you can see it from a different perspective, and you can kind of mesh the two together, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is one of my favorite storylines just because I think it's just it like you said, Gary, it really shows the struggle that Batman has as a character of he's a man in the midst of gods, because that's what
Right.
DC's heroes are gods. And and it's before the Batman will win everything, if he has enough prep time kind of genre that went to it. So
Well, yeah, and that was like like the old Brave and the Bold era and stuff. Batman, I think, was at his best during those times
mhm.
as a character that you could relate to. All right, number two, sir.
Number two, I tried to mix this up a little bit. So number two is actually the oldest comic book I have in my collection. It is
Oh,
it is Dick Tracy, and this is from 1948.
wow.
It's the popped wheat giveaway issue. So there's a cereal pop wheat cereal back in late 40s, and this was you could get send in stuff to get this comic.
And man,
And
does that present well?
yeah, it's beat up around the corners, but for being a 1948,
Yeah,
it's
what do you want?
right. And being a pop giveaway, like I'm sure they were not taking care of comics very well. A cereal company was not doing
Yeah,
the
it wasn't
best.
really the focus.
And this is more for what it represents for my collection, not as much of like the storyline for me. Because Dick Tracy was the first kind of, besides Batman, was what I got into reading comics. Was my grandma used to send me the Dick Tracy newspaper strips.
Oh.
And so this was it. And Dick Tracy, then the movie was the first movie I got to see in theaters. So like
I was just going to ask you if you liked the movie.
I love it. I have my graphic novels here and my Batman wall over there. I have an entire shelf dedicated to Dick Tracy in my basement. I'm probably one of the few people that have a shrine to Dick Tracy in my basement.
You've been picking up any of the old Dick Tracy monthlies?
The which ones?
The Dell Dick Tracy monthlies back in the from the 40s.
Yeah, so I have some of those. I have what I'm trying to now get into is they have these hardback covers
Mhm.
of all the comic strips that are like 1930 to
Right.
32,
Yeah.
19. I want to slowly get all of those. They're because they're so big and in depth, they're so expensive. But a lot of those, the Dick Tracy comics are just reprints of the comic strips from
The
their
early, yeah, the first
Right.
several, I think like first 13 issues of R, and then they switch over to some original content.
yeah,
But they're very inexpensive, the Dick Tracy stuff. I mean, mid-grade books, you can pick them up for like 40 to 50 bucks raw,
yeah,
which is really kind of nice, Billy, if you want to get if anybody wanted to get into a piece of the golden age,
right.
and some of that kind of those classic kind of characters that people were familiar with, Green Hornet and Dick Tracy and some of that stuff. That's
Yeah, Phantom is up there.
Yeah.
It like those are some of those golden age heroes, laid the groundwork for what we have. I need to at some point. What's really cool about was a unique thing. There's a museum in Columbus, Ohio. It's a cartoon strip museum, and it's free to go to. And one of the pieces that they have in this museum is Chester Gold's drawing board table that he created Dick
Ooh.
Tracy on. And it's it's just neat to see this old wooden drawing board from that created something from my child, that I resonated so well with my childhood. And it has like the dark black smear all along the side from where he would light the drawing board on fire to dry the black ink faster so he could produce more. Like it's like so cool to see
Wow.
so yeah, there's just a lot of history with Dick Tracy, and it is like you said, Rob, it's such a great character that I can pick up, and that like not a lot of people are hunting for Dick Tracy comic books.
I stumble on it. It's more you stumble
Yeah.
across them.
You
And it's
stumble
just like,
across,
oh, hey, look at that. 30 bucks, 25 bucks, 40 bucks.
yeah, and so that's it's one of those like they tried to reboot the character a couple years ago. They had a really solid 4-issue arc with it, and then they had one that was like Dick Tracy's out in space, and it's like, no, stop.
No, yeah.
Right. Do you
It's
understand the character at all?
It's like, stop. Like, no, like you're killing it for me. So
But
yeah,
that's the cool thing about being a niche collector, though, is you can pick up a lot of times. It goes one way or the other, right? They're either astronomically priced, or they're bottom of the barrel. They're not usually mid grade. You can either
Right.
pick them up cheap, or you're going to pay a bundle.
Yeah.
So
And that's I mean, that's how I got into my collecting, because it was my collecting has been trying to relive my childhood, the
Right.
nostalgia of childhood. And so it is, my collecting is very niche.
Cool.
And it's all right. Number 3, sir.
Number 3, this is one that I really was excited to get. This is issue number 153, World's Finest. This is the infamous Batman slapping Robin panel.
Oh, okay.
And the iconic meme that you see all the time of Batman slapping, it's in this issue. And I remember finding out, like, when I had that meme on my wall for stuff, that like it was a whiteboard that I could write in stuff in my office. And I remember, like, I need to find this issue before it blows up for whatever reason, because I was just like, people are going to want it because it's a meme. And I had been hunting for just a decent copy for a while. And so it was the one that I was super excited to get. It's just, how often does a comic book panel make it into a pop culture meme in our world?
Right.
And
that's one of the biggest.
Right.
Yeah, that book did go up quite a bit during the pandemic time, as people were sitting around looking for something to spend money on.
Yeah, and this was, and this was one of those that was, you always have those like cool stories. Like, I was looking to try and find it, and I was asking the guy, like, hey, where's your World Finest? I'm looking for this book. He's like, oh, we have that one. It's going to be on the wall. It's a big book. He's like, but if you want to just look for other World Finest, here's our World Finest box. And sure enough, digging through the World Finest, they hadn't pulled it, and it was like $10. I was like, thank you.
Exactly.
Sold.
Right. So and that's kind of, that has been the staple for my collecting, is of, finding those things that trigger me from like pop culture and stuff, of like, oh, that's cool and it relates to Batman and stuff, or just things that, like, man, brings back my childhood. Yeah, and he's throwing a kryptonite battering. What more do you want?
And I remember too the other the Superman comic that's using memes all the time, with him with the boy crying in the bed and Superman looking like he's I found that at my LCS for my buddy Jimmy, Small Town Collectibles. I got that for $8. I was like, what a steal. I bought that and sent it off to him.
So good.
Right?
So good. So that was just one that I really liked. It again, it wasn't as much for the story. A lot more of the other ones are going to get into. I brought them to the show because of the story. So,
well, there's a lot that we all buy as collectors just out of pure nostalgia, or just for one feeling it invokes in you, right?
Mm-hmm. I know what you're talking about, Gary.
Right? Yeah, I've never seen Rob go down that rabbit hole, not once.
Not once at all, Rob.
Never impulse buying. That's me.
All right, number 4, sir.
Number 4 is it's a character that I got into later in the game. It's issue number 5. This, I believe, and people in the chat can correct me if I'm wrong, the second arc of Booster Gold. So he had the original run with Dan Jurgens when he was first created. This is then, I believe Jurgens is on. Oh no, Jeff Johns is on this one. Jurgens is on it too. I thought he was. So, and this is Booster Gold's one of those characters for me that, like, when you deal with time travel, it can be a dicey thing of like how it's done. And I think this is done really well, especially, and I pulled this issue because obviously you can tell it's paying homage to the Batman Killing Joke.
Right.
And this is the issue where Rip kind of sets a stage for Booster Gold here, and is like, look, yes, you can go back and change things in time, as a time traveler. Like, that's a benefit of what we can do. But there are, and I forget the phrasing that he actually uses, but there are like moments that no matter what happened, you can never change it. Like, it's a moment that has to happen in history, and there's nothing you can do about it. And Booster is like, being Booster's like, no, there's absolutely a way. And then so this issue, Booster Gold's going back to the scene where Barbara Gordon gets shot by the Joker. And Booster Gold gets killed like 20 times in this issue because he keeps trying to go back and save her. And him and her keep dying in different ways in this issue. And it's a powerful mindset of like, and it was an interesting thing for DC, I feel like, in which it makes sense that Jeff Johns was involved in this book, where he's like, no, there are going to be some staple moments in the DC history, and we're not going to be able to mess around with the multiverse or Infinite Crisis and things like these are always going to be staples that happen. And that was one of those moments of that story from Batman the Killing Joke. That's a part of Barbara Gordon's history.
Right, and that's a cool story concept. Fix moments in time that can't be altered.
Yeah. And
Right?
so that was
Go
huge for
ahead.
Booster. That was huge for Booster to try and figure that out and come to terms with that because he's been able to change it in other times. And I think that's cool for us as, DC readers.
And just in general, as a statement with DC Comics, like, and you hear it with so many different characters, just how important Jeff Johns was to that company for all these different storylines that he wrote and created that became classics. Like, you have your creators on both sides, like Stan Lee, Jeff Johns, Denny O'Neil, who skirted both, Roy Thomas. Just these iconic creators, which have just built these companies on their backs, it seems, or at least floated them. Like or Chris Claremont, even for the X-Men, like their importance in comic history just can't be disputed.
Yeah, and that's
number 5.
That's an aspect, of John's. There's been a lot of story arcs where a handful of mine I was pulling from of looking, I'm like, oh, yep, it's another John's run.
Right.
I was looking at pulling the Aquaman 52 because I thought that was one of those first kind of moments of where Aquaman, he embraces that people think he's a joke. There's a scene of him in the diner basically with a reporter and bam, and he leans into it and is telling is like, this is going to be a new style of Aquaman. I'm like, I'm here for it.
Right. Yeah. It would that's cool too, because Aquaman could just rise everything up and wipe out half the surface if he wanted.
Right. Right. But
Super Friends
just made him a joke.
I was gonna say Super Friends TV show ruined them.
For a long time.
All right, number 5, sir.
Number 5. All right. I almost said this is gonna be my first indie book, but no, it's another DC book. This is one of my favorites. So from one of my favorite creators, Mark Russell. His story arc on the Flintstones is fantastic, and this is a story that I fell in love with Mark Russell as a creator, and he's one of my favorite writers. But to take a property as goofy as the Flintstones, and he grounds it, and it's such a powerful. He's such a tongue-in-cheek story writer, and the satire he's known for, but he just takes it in a way that like I'm sure most people are like, oh, this is a Flintstone book. I'm not picking it up. And I'm assuming when this came out, people are like, no, y'all got to go read this Flintstone book.
Well, that and such an iconic property. Like,
right.
When you see people tackle properties like this, you got to think as a creator, they're like, this is something I can't mess up. This is iconic in history. I mean, all of us on this panel grew up watching Flintstones.
Yeah, and then there's the iconic question: Wilma or Betty?
Betty.
Wilma.
Wilma. It's always the redhead. Come on.
I can't argue with the logic.
Or to quote them from quote Red Dwarf is, well, I'd go with Betty, but I'd be thinking of Wilma.
Or to quote Joey from Friends, jelly in one hand, a woman in the other. Put your hands together, my friend. Yeah, just woman and Betty. John's comments from Kids agrees. This is the best part of this show, Greg, is seeing the individual comics that are different from anything you see anywhere else from anybody, right?
Yeah.
And like Booster Gold and Flintstones and Dick Tracy, those are the 3 we haven't had on here yet, and it's just fun to see the different things that affect people that are made by these companies that other people might not even consider, but they mean something to you.
Yeah, and it just is. It is. I love it, and that's where it's like, I've always said on my channel, I'm like, listen, gang, I collect what I like, and it's unique, it's weird, obscure half the time. Yeah, and John's right. Flintstones explore capitalism, and it just is brilliantly done, and they explore religion in this, and he just tackles a lot of issues that you're like, you're really doing this in a Flintstone book.
Now, where do you stand on Kazoo? Because he was a love or hate character for people.
I mean, by the time I really got into Flintstones, it was later on as a kid. So I would say more of a hate.
Well, it was definitely a change in the way the show was made after Kazoo came on.
Yeah.
Yeah, didn't need it.
Yeah. So I'm at the more. If we don't see a Super Pro, I'm gonna call the cops.
All right, number 6. What you got?
Well, be careful what you wish for, Cole. Bringing in my Marvel book.
Nice. I had that special.
So yeah, man, this is signed by Joe Giusco, who does the cover art on this, and the interior is signed by Fabian. I actually just got that done this year at a con.
How fun is it to bring a book like that to have a creator sign
Oh,
that most people think is a joke book?
It was great. It was one of my favorite experiences because I also brought my Super Pro on card figure.
Oh, nice.
Oh, I didn't know they made that.
Most people don't, and Fabian signed it there too. And like, who's bringing this to,
Right.
to a con to get signed? Everyone was bringing Deadpool. They were bringing the New Mutants, 98, and I showed up with Super Pros, and he literally, I was like, hey, can I get a picture of you just sign it? Like, and he's like, he took off his mask. He's like, I'll get COVID for this. I don't care. Like, and he has like, he's holding up the book, and because he loved it as a thing, because we talked about Super Pro a lot, and I get it. It's not a great book, but
it doesn't have to be though.
Right, and that's
some
the
things
thing.
Are just fun.
And that's the thing is, again, it's what I told him. I told Fabian, I'm like, I know this is gonna sound weird, but like Super Pro is one of the things that got me into comics because I was a big sports guy as a kid, and so like NFL merging with comic books, it was almost a way of saying like my kind of secret hobby of comics was cool because it was NFL, which is popular by everybody. All the cool kids were wearing the puffy starter jackets and things like that. Would I shave my beard if I got to play Super Pro in the MCU? Oh,
what if you did a bearded Super Pro in the modern day?
Man, I'd shave my beard if I could play anybody in an MCU movie. But Super Pro, are you kidding me? Of course.
And of course, they did the same thing they did with all the odd titles that they were bringing up. Spider-Man's in the first issue, right? He's a franchise character for Marvel.
Spider-Man's in the first issue. Captain America's in issue 7. Crossbones is in it. And then they start to bring in, sports stars. So I think I want to say Lawrence Taylor was in one of the issues from the Giants. And it just, again, there's 12 issues and people always are surprised by that. But it's something that I go back and I read and it brings me enjoyment because it gives me that nostalgia high from when I was a kid of reading these and, the absurd storylines of who Super Pro is a person and how he was created. And I love what that, reignites in me. And, because it means a lot to me as a collector. I know people are like, oh, Super Pro, it's a joke. And like, I've always talked about Super Pro and everyone knows, like, if I'm coming on a show, Super Pro is being mentioned, but there is a part of it where it just is near and dear to my heart because of what it meant to me as a kid. And you can't.
That's how I am with a lot of the 2099 stuff. And like, when I take like a Ravage 2099 to get it signed by a creator or something, and people, and it's probably, sometimes it's like they go, I don't think I've ever signed one. I mean, I had Keith Williams sign it, and he's like, oh, I don't know if I've ever signed one of these before. This is like, but he went into this great story about working on it with Stan Lee and how it was, and how his first encounter and all this stuff. And these guys, they have these memories working on these properties that, they don't see all the time. And it's great for them to get to see something different sometimes. And you get some better stories out of them rather than just a simple, all right, here you go.
But and you can see it in a creator's face when you bring something odd. I mean, how boring is it when you get like 3,000 Deadpools in a row, right?
Right.
I'm like, okay. Ooh, because no matter what the property is, they put a little bit of themselves into it,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
it's nice to get appreciated for it.
Right.
Yeah, and he makes a joke, and I forget who the editor was at the time. He's like, you need to go over and talk to was it Bob Hall? I don't remember who it was at the. He goes, because reason I did this book was because I was promised Super Bowl tickets, and then my editor took them.
Oh,
And he was at the same con. I'm blanking on who the name was. But yeah, those, I mean, Rob, you guys talk about those interactions are the best interactions, I think, with I saw Bobby said it in the chat with creators. I took issue number 1 of Robin, the Tim Drake, the first series of Robin that Tom Gromit did, and this sucker was beat up to shreds. And I was like, I'm gonna get go on eBay and buy a issue number 1 of it in a nicer copy and get signed.
Just
It's like
$2 and get a great
right.
copy.
Because it wasn't going to cost me anything to do it, because it's not like I was like, you know what? No, like I want. It does sound like it wasn't Jim Shooter. I know that. But it's he saw the book and he goes, "Holy cow, this thing is beat up." Like you can tell, like it was well read. I'm like, dude, I read this book for years every day. Like it was. And he signed it, and then we talked for 20-30 minutes about just like what that meant to him creating books, and to see that like a character in a story that he spent a lot of time on, what that how it impacted somebody. Because they're right, they're used to always hearing those same stories, and the things, or the high grade copies that they see signed, and you're like, are you actually a fan? And you can't ask that. But like when you see someone bringing a beat up copy of a book that is worthless, and it's like, hey, I want you to sign this, man, they dig it for sure.
Yeah.
well, that's the thing, right? Because when you give him that beat up copy, he knows that was thoroughly enjoyed by you.
Right.
Yeah. So it's a
Or
creator
you were looking for something and found it in the trunk of your car, and
like, shoot.
right.
He almost is like, all right, I gotta quiz you. Like, why is this so beat up? Do you know the story, or or are you like Rob? You just found it in a car and you're like, whatever.
Hey, Val. Either way, you're signing it. So
That's right.
I'm in line. You're stuck with it. All right, number 7, bud.
Yeah. So number 7 is one I just was on JP's channel talking about, and I had to bring it here. It's from Image. It's issue number 1 of Murder Falcon, Daniel Warren Johnson. And Mike Spicer did this. This is one of those comics that like I feel like I should not have liked. It wasn't like heavy metal mixed with like kaiju monster kind of things. And I was just like, and yep, I'm glad John's still in the chat here, because he is one of the driving forces for why I picked it up. He was raving about it all the time, and I'm just like, no. This is one of the first, like, and it's one of those stories that I read when I got back into collecting, and it means a lot to me because it just showed me comics have like have a lot of heart, and it's finding the stories that speak to you, and when you find a story that speaks to you in a way that you're like, holy buckets, I never expected that I was going to enjoy this. And it's just this idea of the main character who's going through a struggle. He's getting punched down by life, and there's these monsters that attack the world, and whenever he strums this guitar, now his murder falcon called Murph comes out and fights these monsters for him, and he basically has to get the band back together, and they all have, when their instruments play, different characters that fight these monsters. And
wow.
It's, if you've never read Murder Falcon, I don't even care what you think about it, just read the first issue. If you're not hooked, whew.
Right, what a unique concept.
It really is. And it just shows, like, again, I've read it in multiple phases of when I was going through things in life, and so it just impacts me a lot of different ways, now and then. And it just shows you, to me, how, when everyone's like comics are for kids, you're like, man, then call me a kid all you want because this comic's for me. Like it
you guys don't
shows you
even
how
know.
depth and how powerful a story can be.
If comics are for kids, then their allowances are well underpaid.
Right.
Right?
Comics are for kids that just haven't grown up, or we've grown up and we just have money now.
Exactly.
Hey, there's whole words I learned in comics and I never saw in any literature that are legit words that I had people that when I use them in a sentence, not thinking about it, I had people accuse me of making them up. I'm like, it's a real word. Look it up.
Right.
I mean, comics do teach you literacy as well as just give you fun, banging stories.
Right. And it's so important to aspect to have those, in comics and what that were. Yeah. I mean, I know what's coming in the story and I still get emotional and tear up. And it's so good. I'm glad to see so many people in the chat are loving it.
I've heard nothing but good things about it, so I've stayed clear of it because people jump off a bridge. I'm not going with them.
I get it. But you know what you do is
I rebel by staying mainstream into Batman and Spider-Man.
and that's okay. But what you can do is it's almost cool now to be like, I'm gonna read it, but I'm gonna read it ironically, and then like you can not like it and be like, I don't
I'd have to grow a
like
beard again to do that.
Right? Yeah, he can pretend not to like it and then keep reading it every week,
Like,
privately to himself.
in
No,
these
I've heard-
private chats off after we get off camera, I'm like, oh my gosh, guys, the book is so good, but I'll beat
Right?
you up if you tell anybody I told you that.
You
Right.
see, like Rob rocking in a corner. Love you, Murder Falcon.
No, I've heard nothing but great things. And is that the same one? Is the same guy who's doing do a power bomb or
Yeah,
whatever?
so it's the same. He did
Yeah.
Beta Ray Bill for Marvel. He did the Wonder Woman Dead Earth for DC. And he's doing Do a Power Bomb right now. And again, I would put Do a Power Bomb in that same category of if you don't like it's basically Do a Power Bomb is like if wrestling and Mortal Kombat came together. And again, it takes these off the wall concepts that you're like, this should not work in any way. And because he can develop characters and create the storyline of heart, and he's able to engage you, but he's also able to keep you on your edge of your seat and your toe, like what's going to happen. Again, man, I would definitely check out that one because I know a lot of people are like, I'm not going to pick up Do a Powerbomb. I don't know anything about wrestling. I don't like wrestling. And it's like, y'all, this book is great.
Yeah, I mean, there's something great with the stories because I'm not reading them. I don't know anything about them, but I know that they're connected and stuff just from listening to so many people talk about it. So when independent books get that kind of buzz that it will permeate somebody who has no interest in them on the surface, it starts and makes them start, well, maybe I should be reading it.
Right.
Then it's done something, it's doing something right.
Yeah.
Now, how many issues did that Murder Falcon go, Bearded?
John can correct me in the chat. I want to say 8 issues. I've got the collected here. 1 through 8.
Okay.
And then if you get the hardcover, which I found out when I did the show, there's like a mini bonus issue. But it's definitely a great one. I highly recommend, checking out if like
I might have to look that trade up.
So if your library, get it from your library. If you don't even want to buy it, like it's a good book.
Cool.
All right, number 8, sir.
Number 8. Where do we want to go now? All right. We'll save that one. All right. Yeah. All right. We'll do this one. So I'm bringing Jeff Johns back to the table, gang. So,
nice.
And this is my favorite. This is my favorite cover from that run. It is the New 52 Justice League run.
That is a great cover.
The Superman and Wonder Woman. It's a 9-2. But
I remember I was reading this on digital, and I remember when this happened, I was like, oh, okay, we're taking a new direction.
Right. But this is, this cover is Jim Lee, and so the first run of these. I mean, talk about the creative people on this Justice League run. This is one of my favorite Justice League story runs. Jeff Johns, did it. Jim Lee did art on the early stuff. And then I think it was Ivan Reyes did some stuff later in the mid. And then towards the end, when you get to the Justice League Darkseid War, you get Jason Fabok on it. And I mean, if you're not familiar with him, did the art for Three Jokers, which I thought was
Yeah.
fantastic. It's such a cool, and there's so many. Dark Side War is great. You get the was it the Morbius share, you get Jessica Cruz story in here. You get the Shazam family storyline, and there's just so many great iconic DC character moments in that arc of the Justice League. It's one of my go-to Justice League stories. I go back and reread it very often.
Man, and Superman was batting out of his league there.
I mean,
he's too vanilla for Wonder Woman.
Isn't she all bound up on that cover in the ropes?
He is.
Oh, he is.
Wait,
She's
that's
got
her
him all.
rope. That's the last.
She's got him all bound up. Got it.
Yeah. So I mean, I like that they went that story route of like, two of the most powerful people, like, hey, they're gonna hook up and try and go. But I agree, like I think he does all right having Lois though, so it works out well.
Had one kick-ass super baby out of that couple. Well, and imagine poor Lois's ego now. Well, how do you compete with Wonder Woman?
Yeah, but I feel like if anyone has an ego that could compete with Wonder Woman, Lois is one of the most confident people in comic books. Like she goes toe to toe with anybody because she knows she is.
Well, until Wonder Woman goes like this and she flings a couple miles away and crash lands, and that's it for Lois.
Listen, but you got to have that confidence. It's like Batman, right? You got to have that confidence when you're hanging out with these gods.
You do.
Because otherwise it's like, what are you doing? But yeah, if people haven't read this series, I highly recommend checking it out. Start at the beginning. And it builds up greatly to the Dark Side War, which was a lot of fun.
Now, real quick, we'll just go, who's your favorite? Because I know you're a big DC guy. Who's your favorite DC villain?
So my favorite DC villain, it has to be in the Batman world for me because it's Batman so cool. It's the Riddler, hands down. And I know a lot of people think like the Riddler is the poor man's Joker, but I love the Riddler because of he matches Batman with the wits. That's what Batman is. Greatest detective. The Riddler matches up as a great villain for me because, at least in the comic books, more recently, and even in Batman the Animated Series, the TV show, when I first was kind of exposed to the Riddler, was the Riddler goes toe to toe with Batman when it comes to wits, and you see that in the Batman the Animated Series show a lot. Yeah, I think the Riddler is just, I think he's highly underutilized in comic books. Still, there's a few good Riddler stories, but there's not a lot of great Riddler stories out there.
I think he's one of those characters that needs that next level writer on him that really makes him pop,
Yeah. So it's, I liked what they did with, the character, even though in the new movie, because I was
going to ask.
It's completely different. I mean, I grew up watching Batman 66, so Frank Gorshin is my Riddler through and through. And then the first Batman movie I ever got to see in theaters was Batman Forever. So Jim Carrey's representation of the Riddler, it means a lot to me too. But I love what Paul Dano is one of the most underappreciated actors of this time. Like, the dude can act, and I liked how it portrayed it in a different light. And man, the dude can write a comic book because he's writing now the Batman, the Riddler not year one, but it's basically like a prelogue to the movie, and Paul Dano's writing it, and it doesn't feel like someone who's never written a comic book is writing it.
Oh, nice. He's got the chops.
I like the Riddler representations they did on Gotham.
Yes. I appreciated that one too. Like, there really hasn't been too many Riddler interpretations I didn't like, because I like who does the voice acting on Batman the Animated Series? John Glover, who was Lex Luthor's dad in Smallville. Again, really does the wit, and I think probably the only interpretation of the Riddler I don't like was when what's his face replaced Frank Gorshin in season 2. He was Gomez.
John Aston.
Yeah.
No, that was just a hard juxtaposition.
Yes.
All too. It was like, eh.
Yeah. So
Didn't have the charisma to pull it off, huh?
Well, it's just
It-
the wrong. It's the
it's the wrong
wrong
role for him.
style. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's plus you were just he was already in your mind when as soon as you saw him, you see Gomez
Yeah.
at that point,
Right.
and so you couldn't get around that, unfortunately, and that's unfortunate for the actor, but I mean it was just a massive juxtaposition from Gorshin.
And I mean, and that's the thing is like the Riddler was the main bad guy in that first season, and that's why he wasn't in season 2 because Frank wanted more money. But I mean, Cesar Romero's Joker was fantastic too. Like the actors they had as the villains in that 66 show.
Oh,
And I liked how Cesar Romero refused to shave his mustache
Right.
for the role. Yeah,
Right.
you know who I am. You either get me or you don't.
And that's why DC was so set on making Henry Cavill not have a mustache and covering it up because they're like, shoot, we're not going to get Cesar Romero again. We're going to cover it up with CGI if you're not going to shave it.
Yeah, but they could have spent a couple bucks on the CGI though.
They could have, but they didn't.
why did you just put a Band-Aid over
face
it?
paint better.
Right? They went into DC couch cushions and just pulled up some change out there.
It's like, come on, put a Band-Aid over it. I mean, I don't know. It's
Right? You're like trying to watch Henry Cavill and you
Yeah.
got like this whole thing going on all weird, like distorting that poor guy's face. All right. Number nine, sir. Number nine.
Number 9. Okay, yeah. So number 9 is DC
Got
versus
stuck in the
Marvel.
Beatles song.
This is
Nice.
was again so iconic. I actually have a love-hate relationship with this book, but I'll get to that later. But this
Great
book,
signature placement too.
yeah. So Joe Rubenstein signed that, and then Dan Jurgens signed right there. So I want to get Ron Mars eventually, but this I grew up reading the DC versus Marvel, which then this was a 4-issue series, and after issue 3, I think it was issue 3, they launched into the Amalgam series, which is where they converged, Batman and Wolverine as a character. They combined Captain
Superboy
America
and
and
Spider-Man.
Superman.
yeah, and
Doctor
Flash and and Demon
Ghost Rider,
and
wasn't it?
Ghost Rider. It was a combination. It was multiples. So it was a little bit of
Yeah.
Edragon and a little bit of that, and you had Spider Boy.
Doctor
And you
Strange
had,
Fate.
Yeah.
It
Well,
was
that whole amalgam was so much fun though.
Thor and the new Asgardians.
It really was, and this was this was prime 90s of where they were going into the I think there were 8 pre-made fights or something like that where the writers picked the fights and who would win, and then they had the fan voting of who's going to win between Superman and Hulk, who's going to win between Batman, Captain America, who's going to win between Storm and Wonder Woman. The other one I think they had to fan vote on was Wolverine and Lobo. And then I want to say the last one they had fans vote on was Spider-Man and Superboy. And it was just it launched such another important aspect for my childhood. Like, whoever thought we would get DC and Marvel to combine, and how often do you sit there as a kid with your friends, and YouTube, we still do it of who's gonna win in this fight, who would win here, and you're like, well, so and so would do this if they won here, and it's just a fun way to nerd out about it. And then when they took it where they had the amalgam where they're like, let's merge these characters. Like, dude, Batman mixed with Wolverine was the coolest thing ever. And they did a Legends of the Dark. They called it Legends of the Dark Claw was the first series. And then when they did the second half of the amalgam run, they did the Dark Claw Adventures, and it was done in the Batman the Animated Series comic style. It was just so much fun to see. They did Howard the Duck and Lobo were the two that they combined. Like, come on, so good.
And I like too that it sent a message out to the extreme fanboys, right? Where the companies hate each other. It's you either like this or you like that. And you see, look, these two companies, they're smart. They take from each other all the time. They're both full of copycat characters. They
Right.
know what they're doing. That's why Stanley always called them the distinguished competition. They're both out there to make money. They know if they make a character, the other one's going to find a copycat character to put in their universe.
Mm-hmm.
It showed, these companies got along. They knew as a business what was good for them, but it also was a cool way to unite the comic readers of the time too. And what creates sales, right? Debate. So, like
Right.
you were saying, you had all this debate. So those books were flying.
Right. And who's not, and you're basically like, you have a lot of factions that are like, uh they all weren't rigged in the book. I mean, there was fan voting on the 4. They had different outcomes for it. Actually,
He's just trying to trigger you.
I know, and that's okay. Well, because you wonder about that. Of like, there were some that were the writers had to sit there and say, and it was interesting. Even like here, DC and Marvel. So it's DC versus Marvel. I think issue 2 it was Marvel and versus DC, and then like issue 3, they rotated who got the first part in the comics, and it was interesting to see that. And I'll recommend, if people have never read Slugfest, is one of the best books out there as a comic book fan. It basically is the 50-year war between DC and Marvel, and it goes through the history of the two companies and how often they used writers from each other's companies, and how they really didn't, there was this fight, but how often they, merged with stuff. And it's a cool, anybody who's a comic fan, you got to check it out if you can stand reading a novel. It's really cool. They did actually a TV show based off of it. It was going to be for whatever that stupid channel, when that was like, oh, people only watch 15-minute videos, and so they were making a whole channel.
Right. It was so short lived. I can't even remember the name.
Right.
Anymore.
It was like Quippy or something. It was something dumb, and then the rights got Quibi. Okay.
Phew.
And then the rights got sold to, I think they produced it on Roku. And there are 15-minute episodes, and it's on Roku TV, and there's like 8 of them, but they tell great stories. They talk about some of the like first Comic-Con, like where this guy just threw like a cosplay party at his house, and and a bunch of comic writers would go over there, and like, it's just, and they have like Brandon Roth, and they have people who played superhero characters playing these comic book characters in the reenactments and it's just a lot of fun. But yeah, so DC versus Marvel was up there, and I have the hate for that book because it's also the book that got me out of comics for a long time.
Really? Why?
Well, because I had such a fond memory of this as a kid. And we all go through phases where I wasn't reading as a lot in high school just because I was doing sports and things. So I just sat, and when I was outside of college, I wanted to get back into reading comics. I remember walking into a store, and I literally was like, hey, I'm like, and it was in college because it was internet was in its still was trying to figure out, Google wasn't what Google is nowadays. And I remember asking them like, hey, do you guys have this comic where DC and Marvel fought each other? I was like, I remember reading it as a kid, but I can't think of it. And the guy looked at me, he's like, that would never happen. Like, I was like, no, man, I swear it happened. He goes, no, dude, you're an idiot. It would never happen.
Wow.
And like, I'm like, now they didn't have a lot of trades of that because that was one of the big issues. So I get, but the comic book store owner was just so negative to me. I was just like, man, screw this. I'm like, I don't want to get back into it.
I got out of comics a few times because of bad experiences at comic shops. And I'm like, it's too bad that they can do that to you.
Yeah. And Access. So someone mentioned Son of a Bruce Access. They did a 4-issue Access series too, talking about, I think it was All Access DC versus Marvel, which was kind of how the character of the amalgam of how the characters get merged. It was just a fun time. Again, maybe not the best stories there, but the ones that hit and were done right, man, because they had all the heavy hitters in the 90s on those books.
Right. And sometimes it's just about how much it triggers your imagination, not even the story.
Yeah, and it makes you go want to go like, did they combine the right characters? Like they would never, if they did this now, they would never have Superboy as a main character that they're probably crossing over with. And, I would wonder if they would even do Lobo right now as if they're picking like their 12, who they're doing from their 12 DC and who's 12 from Marvel that they're doing. So it'd be interesting to see who they do now.
Especially DC now, seeing they have such a narrow focus, it seems, on just some of the main characters.
Right. But like Green Lantern wasn't really even in this. And it's like, they did cross over. They didn't do Green Lantern until the second wave of the Amalgam books. And it was Green Lantern and Iron Man because they were still B-list characters really in the 90s. Like Iron Man was on the back page of what? Infinity Gauntlet?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was always one of those characters in the back of the panel.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, and you say that, but his book was still popular enough where it's got a serious amount of issues that first run.
Yep. Yeah, it's Brother John talked. I talked to him for a good amount on my channel about just creating the the Amalgam and how much he wanted that Doctor Strange trait. He's like, I don't care about anyone else. I want that. So
now, did you ever have two characters you wanted amalgamated that didn't happen?
As much as I talk about this, I don't know if I've ever actually thought about that, because if you would have told me to cross over Batman and Wolverine, I would have said that sounds dumb. But I don't know who I'd want to have crossed over now. Like, I'd probably have to say I want to see Booster Gold in there, but I don't know who I'd cross Booster Gold with from Marvel. Huh. Man, now it's got me thinking.
So there we go. We got you set. Well, you can have an answer for us by Thursday.
All right. I'll try. I'll think of it. Yeah. What am I doing? I might as well just come on and be in the hot seat on Thursday. I have to answer questions then.
Write that down. Mark the tape.
Number 10, sir.
Number 10. I brought this in because that one kind of, I have a love-hate because it got me out of it for a little bit. Boom. How do I not even think of it? It writes itself. Booster Gold and Super Pro. I mean, come on. Like, they're both football players. It's brilliant. Son of a Bruce.
Bring Fabian back.
So this is one comic. People are going to hate it, but got me back into comics was this run of Tom King. Not this issue, but this run. Now this issue I brought because it's just really dope, because I'm getting all the creators that were on that book to sign it. So
it is a nice cover.
Yeah, so I've got Greg Capullo there, Mitch Gerard's there, David Finch, Neil Adams, Amy Reeder. I think is Amy Reeder on this one? I forget. Becky Cloonan, not Amy Reeder. Tom King's there. So, but this was one of those. I walked into an LCS and I was like, hey, I want to pick up an LCS opened up right by my house like 8 minutes a couple years ago. And I said, I walked in, I was like, I want to get back in the comics. What do you recommend? He goes, what would you read? I was like, well, Batman. And he goes, well, pick up Batman then. Like, I mean, he kind of was just like, I'm not, they're like, what do you like? Like, I was like, well, Batman. He goes, then pick up Batman. And I kind of talked to him about that jokingly because we become really good friends now. And I'm like, you just don't want to get. He was like, well, yeah, because I'm not going to sit here and I don't know what you like. If you're going to like Saga, or if you're going to like all these other ones that people Watchmen that people recommend that you haven't read. He goes, pick what you like. And he goes, Batman was popular. So I came in, I think it was issue 54 or 52. I have to double check when it was this run. So it was right after the wedding. It was when Batman was fighting KG Beast. And it was right before the whole storyline in Nightwing where he gets shot in the head, but he gets shot in the Batman book and then becomes Rick Grayson and that whole cluster of a run. But this was, it got me back into it. So I knew the Batman wedding that people were like, oh, it sucks because, Lady Fantastic, her favorite one of the Amalgam would have been where they combined Lobo and Howard the Duck, because she's a big fan of ducks. Don't ask me why, but she is. But that was just it. I appreciated Tom King's run, and then going back and I read that arc, and then I went right back to picking up. I read all the from start on the DC app, and so I could play catch up. So I was like, boom, 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 crushing it. And I didn't go in with expectations of, oh, Batman and Selina are going to get married. And I really love the, I think Gore said it, the dynamic between Batman and Selina in that run, and the people at Tom King. If you might not like Tom King's writing, fine. I can understand how people don't, but man, does that man surround himself with talent when it comes to art.
Right.
Holy buckets, Mitch Strards, David Finch, Clay Mann. Now the stuff doing with Greg Smallwood on Human Target, like the dude can pick an artist and kills it. And so that run just means so much to me because it was one of the first comics I bought when I got back into collecting comic books. This was 2017, 2018 or something. And I told my wife, I'm like, I'm going to go pick up this cause I was like, I'll pick up Batman. I'll pick up a couple books. And I came home with a short box. I was like, hey, I'm just going to fill this short box. We'll keep it in the, in a closet somewhere. And then lo and behold, I'm at like 30 long books. But I love that run. So that, and then, this has always just been a special issue for me because how much this series means to me as a getting back into collecting, and now to have some of these iconic people. So good. Signing that. So,
well, and I think too, and you can answer this probably from a good perspective coming back into comics, as I'm sure Rob can as well.
yep.
But when you leave comics and you come back, sometimes it's a daunting task to want to get back into the character you follow because there's so much history you missed, and it kind of pushes you away for a little bit. You got to get over the fact that there's this big time period and block that you didn't read of this character.
Yeah, and I mean, to go to that point, I went back, so I read all volume 3, and then I was going, and as I was reading, I was going to shops picking up volume 3 to keep in my collection, and then I went back and people were telling me, what stories did I miss? Well, I missed a lot. I was out of comics for 20 years, and so I missed a lot of iconic Batman stories. I missed all of Snyder's run, so I was reading Court of Owls, I missed whew, I missed Batman Hush. I mean, I was out of the, that was volume 1. I was out of Batman game then. So I missed Hush. I missed so many iconic stories. And it was just, I went back and reread so many Batman books that first year, 2 years. I'm still like, for as big of a Batman fan as I am, people are like, have you read this? Like, how have you not read this? I'm like, well, you got to remember, I did take a 20-year break.
Yeah. No, I mean, that, to me, it was that Snyderverse, that New 52 run was where I got back into it. And reading that was those first 25 issues, that Court of Owl stuff was, and all that. I was like, oh, holy cow, this is so good.
When Death in the Family was right after that, basically. And
yeah, and so then Bruce disappeared and Gordon came in with his freaking Gundam suit and whatnot, but which was a little weird. But
so weird.
This is all great. I mean, it's funny because I actually have one of my copies of 50 is also another one where I'm doing a signature collections on, where I've got like 7 signatures on it too for that same 50. It's one of those issues that you're like, oh yeah, okay, a bunch of people worked on it. It's easy to get a bunch of signatures on.
Well, that's how I started to shift a handful of my signature game at cons. Is I pick up those like the DC 80th issues, and so I started that with basically the 50s. So like I got a Wonder Woman one where I've got Doc Evan Shaner's on it, Tom King's on it, Stephanie Phillips signed it. All these people that were working on the Wonder Woman book, or who did the 80th, I've Green Lantern one, I'm getting Daryl Banks and trying to get the Green Lantern creators on there. So
now with Tom King, I wanted to ask you, because you were talking about, huh?
I said, yo, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, because you talked about him and getting good artists. I thought one of the best artist pairings he had was in the Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow book.
Ooh, yes. Oh, who was that? Raphael?
Or City?
I can't remember, but dude, that art was so perfect for that story.
It was, because it's not the traditional art that you would. Someone in the chat has to know. If Gore was in, he would know, and so would John, because I think they both were. But oh man, it was unique, and you're like, man.
And that 8 issues I loved. I thought it gave such a unique perspective on Supergirl. It was just I ate it up. I know some people said it was too long. I thought it was great.
I thought it was
every
perfect.
issue.
I thought it was great. I was a huge fan of it. So I like, that's what I like about Tom King's. He tries different things with characters, and I think he gets away with a lot easier. Is that right, John? Man, I would not have guessed that. I'm not calling you out, John, but I am. I'm
calling you out live.
Oh, that's I don't think you're right, but I could be wrong. You're smarter than me, so man, I don't know. I'm looking it up now on my phone because that's gonna drive me insane just to confirm.
You know what I mean? I have to look stuff up too. It's like I gotta know.
See, he's right. I was wrong. So you know who I'm thinking of? The Raphael did or the name I'm thinking of is did the Rorschach book.
He's looking at the book right now.
I know. I should have, John. I told you I should have done it, and I'm looking it up because it was going to bother me because I had that name stuck in my head.
I can feel John pointing at you through the chat.
I told him on camera live too. I said, I know you're right because you're smarter than me, and he is, and I just proved him all right there.
Now, the 11th book, I think I have a pretty good idea what it is, the one with a personal story. But let's get to it, and maybe you'll surprise us. Maybe it'll be the book I'm thinking about.
Okay. I don't know if I this one is actually, this is the book that means a lot to me and is a personal story to it. So
nice.
Leghorn, I love it.
So this is a sketch cover that's done by Daryl Banks, who is the artist of the Kyle Rayner Green Lantern. Daryl Banks was one of the first big name creators I had on my channel, and one of the first on an interview. And in the middle of the interview, I had asked him, I was like, as getting to work with Green Lantern, is there stuff that you've ever drawn, for DC and, or you wish you could have? And he said, one of the things that you that's true. She is a lot cooler. We've talked about that all throughout the show, that people love my wife more than me, and I'm okay with it. And we lean into it a lot. Was that he was drawing a panel where one of the security guards was reading like a Warner Brothers comic of Looney Tunes, and DC was like, yeah, you can't do that. And he thought it'd be cool because it'd be fine but there was something with copyright, even though DC and Warner Brothers were so tight knit. And he goes, I always thought it'd be cool to just draw draw Foghorn Leghorn as Green Lantern and have him, he's like, I can just picture him, doing his Foghorn Leghorn of in Blackest Night and Darkest, where he does his stutter and Daryl's doing that on the show. And he's like, I just would love to do that. Well, Old Wolf 65, Tony, if you all know him, he watched that interview. He heard that story that Daryl told me. He then commissioned Daryl to do this so Daryl could draw what he always wanted to draw.
Wow.
And then he AOK'd it to me. And like, I've gotten a lot of AOKs. I've gotten a lot of cool. There's an AOK right behind me right there of that Roscoe did of, the Riddler. And there's an AOK of a bearded Funko that someone AOK'd me, like but to have someone who watched my show, and I mean, it was a long interview, watched the whole thing, noticed it, and then was like, hey, I want to go do this. I want to make the creator's day, and then made my day by sending this. And I was blown away that. And
it's a stunning cover.
It really is. I mean, the details that he puts in on, the fence and the farm, and, it's beautiful. And there's no, who else has a Foghorn Leghorn as Green Lantern book? Come on, and that's done on the
grin. The little grin on his face too. It's subtle.
Yeah, it's just,
There's
it's
only one way to make it better, and that's to have a Sinestro chicken hawk on it.
ooh,
Rob, that's
yes.
perfect.
That'd be perfect. I'll get a, but that book means so much to me, as anytime anybody takes time to send, oh gosh,
You knew that was going to happen.
I know, like, I'm surprised it didn't happen when I talked about when we brought out the Dick Tracy books. Usually,
I'm just tired. That's my problem. That's my excuse. I didn't bring it up earlier.
but
But
that's what the community is so cool to see, and I know you've had people on all the time, and Gary, you are always hyping up people on the community, and Rob, and what you're doing with what you did with the community with C3, and what Chris did last year. Like, when people take time to invest in each other, and I mean, I know that could have been cheap to commission a full cover sketch by Daryl Banks,
Right.
and then but it also was like that someone, that took the time to watch what I'm creating and doing. And I'm like, man, that's cool. So that has a special place in my heart, because it just shows you how great this community is.
Right. There's always a surprise in this community.
Yeah.
But it's never a bad one. It's always a heartfelt one. It's always something that in this community you can restore your faith in humanity.
Yep. So I know that wasn't the one what do you think I was going to say?
I thought you were going to bring Saga out.
I thought about that. We can say the Saga stories for Thursday.
In the hot seat.
For the hot
but
seat,
it was nice to see that. That was something fresh and new.
Yeah.
That was incredible.
So,
and who doesn't need to see Foghorn Leghorn as Green Lantern?
Right. So good.
It's a bucket list item there.
It is. It is.
No, that is awesome, and you can just tell the artist had a good time with it, which is really fun.
Oh yeah. So yeah, man. It's always gonna have a place in my collection.
All right. So, what is Bearded Comic Bros spec pick from his PC?
All right. So I'm Gary. I'm trying to. I wanted this show to be of like, man, who's gonna bring books on your channel that different and unique, and we'll see. Maybe we'll get the missus to hop on for a little bit. So no, I'm not. It's not going to be Super Bro. That's not spec. It's not realistic spec. I'm pulling out Batman Gotham Adventures issue number 51. All right, hear me out. This could be false spec, so take it with a grain of salt, people. In my
spec.
Well, I'm saying I could be false on the first appearance here. My research I've done. This is the first appearance of Roland Daggett in comics. And if you don't know Roland Daggett was he was introduced in Batman the Animated Series. He almost kind of looked like he was one of the main bad guys in that series, and he is the guy who helped create Clayface in the series. Oh. So he's the one that had the chemical plant that when he was breaking in to steal the face changing serum, when Matt Hagen broke in to change it, he had his goons pour it in. So why I say this is my hot
those guys.
What?
I said always with the chemical plants with those guys.
So this is why it's my hot spec. So Daggett was in the Batman series, but it was John Daggett in the Nolan series. And so people are always saying John was Roland's son, whatever. So Roland wasn't in anything new yet. However, Clayface has come out as being a series that Matt Reeves wants to do. He did, I think 2 weeks ago, Matt Reeves came out and said, I want to do like a Scarecrow TV series and Clayface. There was a couple others too, because I know they're working on the Penguin one right now. And for me, I think the most realistic story you're going to get out of Clayface is the Matt Hagen storyline. And he's, I believe, the second Clayface. There's like 5 Clayfaces. The first one was Boris Karloff. And he was just an actor who changed his face, which is a very highly possible one too. But I've always thought like if they were trying to do Clayface where it was going to be more than just like someone who's just wearing mask and changing who he is, that it's got to be and actually do like Clayface where he molds his body in shapes because of a chemical. I've always thought that Roland Daggett, they're going to go with the Matt Hagen storyline, is the one that they could do of how he's created by chemical plants or whatever. You know, it might not be the same of pouring down face cream down the guy's mouth,
Right.
but something along the lines of Roland Daggett is going to be help him his origin story for Clayface. So my spec is this is Batman Gotham Adventures. This is the end of, I think there was like 54 issues. And so, you know, they always do less issues the run later the run
Like
goes
smaller
on.
print runs, yeah.
So I'm sure it's a lower print run. I don't know the facts to it. I don't know what
You said
I
that
don't
was
even know if people are
46.
selling that, but because who's looking for Roland Daggett first appearance books? But so I got this and I was looking for it. I had to buy it in a set. I bought like a set of 50 Batman Gotham Adventure books on eBay so I could get that one. But
Well, kind of a double spec because you get Daggett and then you got a Battlestar Galactica coming out. So there is a Daggett in Battlestar Galactica, right?
oh, see?
Well, there you go. Ooh.
See?
See, and again,
Hard stuff.
cool spec.
So
And
Animal.
we all know because of Harley Quinn that those animated books have some true value to them with first appearances.
yeah, I mean, again,
Harley Quinn does.
Roland Daggett's never gonna be. I mean,
No,
but you look at because I mean, you look at like Carmine Falcone's first appearances in the Batman Year Ones, and you know those are decent price, very affordable key books. And Carmine popped up in the Batman universe a lot, but I mean, it is. I have some facts in there. I said I've fact checked it as much as I could because Cole. So shut up.
Don't listen to Cole. He's
right.
got a weak mustache anyway.
Because no one's specking on Roland Daggett. I fact checked it as much as I could, and I'm pretty accurate that is right. So, yeah, there you go.
I think it's cool spec and it's personal spec to you.
Right.
Everything about this is personal. So Cole can take his mustache to the corner and just sit there a minute.
Yeah, I mean Cole has a mustache because he can't grow the rest of it.
Well, there you go. It's just jealousy talking, right?
It is. It is.
Does your
Bearded
mustache
jealousy. It's an
does your
ugly
mustache
thing.
even curl, bro?
Yeah, he can't curl it. I can.
Lady Fantastic. I'm always specking on Dazzler. Right. that's my character that I like that no one else seems to care about. But then I found in this community a lot of people actually are fans of Dazzler.
Mm-hmm.
But wow, that was great. I like that spec because I've never seen that cover before, so it was cool.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed the Amalgam universe because that has a soft spot for me too because I loved when it came out. Love seeing the Flintstones and Dick Tracy, just things you don't see every day. And Dick Tracy, one of those forgotten about characters, much like a Doc Savage, which was so important to the history of nerdom.
Yep.
Because I'd love to see Doc Savage reinvented properly. Not with whatever Dynamite does with him. I want to see him reinvented properly.
Phenomenal. A lot of very different books than what we've seen on a regular basis. I love it. It was great.
Right. I would say bearded, refreshing.
Good. That's what I mean. That's what I've said at the beginning of the show. Like my channel is, it's almost a niche inside of a niche.
But that's what makes it special, right?
Right. So.
I mean, there's nothing worse than going to a bunch of different channels and seeing the same book on every channel. You're like, all right, I can only see this book so much.
Right.
But that was great. All right. So I know you got someplace to be in 12 minutes. We'll start the wrap up.
Yeah.
First, though, I'm going to say, Rob, what's coming up for you, sir?
What day is it? Oh, yeah, Thursday. I'll have a unboxing, actual Dracula mystery box. And then Saturday, we'll have only slabs with Team Ohana. And then we'll go into some mail call, and we'll rinse and repeat type stuff. And that's.
And you've been posting some pretty hot books on Instagram.
I've been so the dam broke at CBCS, and so all the month after month after month of sending books in. And now that they have moved, my speculation is that if you hadn't paid for express, they just warehoused them until they moved. And now that they've moved, they're getting them through them. So the last of what I sent last year is now in shipping and whatnot. So I've had what, eight or nine submissions returned from CBCS in the last 6 to 8 weeks. So yeah, there's a lot of slabs to to post, and there's been a lot of original art that was stacked up in there and some other stuff. So good stuff.
Nice. So on my channel, we may have a guest that you're familiar with on Thursday. Might be this guy over here, Bearded. So tune in Thursday. We'll ask him some questions. We'll get to know him a little bit more. Tonight was about getting him to know him through comics. Thursday will just be about getting to know him through random questions we throw at him.
Yeah.
Next week on Tuesday and Thursday, we are going to have Brian LCS doing double duty.
Nice.
So
like
we'll have him on 1011 for books, and then we'll have him on before the voting concludes to get what's changed this year about the awards and to talk about what's been going on with his channel and how he's changed. So we'll be doing that as well.
Yeah, don't forget, if you haven't already, those CBCA awards, you're almost out of time to vote. cbca.org. Go vote today.
Yeah, and there's somebody who has a channel that's up for like a great collab show. Only Slabs is on there, but there's another great show that's against it.
I'm up for 4 awards, 2 for Only Slabs, and then some other. Well, the mustache one, we shouldn't count that at all. I mean, that's just gonna go to probably Ty Locks because he has a mustache and hair. The only one of us. Yeah, right? I don't know. People seem to love that mullet for some strange reason. But it's not.
Bearded, you should have.
Only 3.
You should have made an outcry about not being included in the hair category.
What was it? I was going through some personal stuff when the awards went out, so I wasn't paying attention for any of it. And then it felt like I was on my 2-month hiatus, and so yeah. But yeah, it was. I was, I'm a little disappointed that the best facial hair, like Bearded, wasn't in. I was a little hurt, but
right?
It's all right.
Always next year.
I don't know. I mean, if Cole gets in for best facial hair and I don't,
yeah, but we all know Cole's a dirty briber,
Yeah. He had
to pay his way in.
Why do you think I attached myself to his ship for once?
No offense intended. I mean, come on, Simon with his, I got half of I dyed half my hair.
Right? Come on.
All right, so speak now. Now we're talking to you.
There you go.
What's coming up on your channel, Bearded?
So as Cole mentioned in the chat, we're dropping our Bearded and Cole's comic cover challenge tomorrow on my channel, and then following right after my channel, Cole's premieres. So it's one of those, it's a fun one that we do where we encourage people to just, again, it's showing off your favorite covers. And we give them a theme that ties around side it. Hit it for the Cole slander is what you should.
Right. Hit it for both.
But I started that, and then Cole weaseled his way into the show because he was just hyping it up more than I was. So I was like, well, all right, well, you should do it with me. But it was just that we get to see other people's comic books. That's covers that you don't get to see often. Like, you said you didn't get to see that Batman Gotham Adventures. There's so many comic covers that we don't get to see. And so we try to give a theme to give people a chance to go. And then we don't care if it's expensive. We just want to see your favorite covers in the midst of that. So that's coming up tomorrow on my channel. We'll be back with a name that character this week with the misses. We've got a lot of stuff in the hopper with the Bearded Cooking Bro show with the misses. It's finding time to do some of these videos with 2 kids and things like that. So, and trying to find time. We wanted to go to see Black Panther and, so we can get a review of that. So it's, there's a lot of stuff that's coming. I've got interview. I'm doing an interview with someone at 9:30 tonight. That's going to be dropping next week. And
Five
It's
and a
almost
half
like you have
minutes.
another job, right?
right. So yeah, so just a lot of good interviews that I've got scheduled that are coming up on deck. So yeah, the kids are my fault completely. They're 100% my fault. But yeah,
Are they though? 100%?
Well,
Maybe
It
99%.
takes two.
99. But so yeah, I mean, so it's
Right.
a lot going on, but
At least the first one. The second one, I don't know. I think it's more 50-50.
And again, all you fine people, tune back in Thursday. Come back to see more.
yeah, we can get deep into the roots of the bearded comic bro there on Thursday on Thursday night. So it's so I got stuff Wednesday. You can find me here Thursday, Friday. You can turn on
Saturday,
YouTube.
happy
I'll be
days.
there.
Busy YouTube week. Almost
Excellent.
appearing as much as Rob does on channels.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, guys. With that, Rob, thank you again for being my gracious co-host, sir. You're always appreciated.
Mhm.
Bearded, a pleasure to actually have a conversation and
Yeah.
officially meet you, man. It was great. And everyone in the chat, thank you for coming out to support these awesome guys. Their links are in the description below. Please sub them up. If you guys are catching it on the rewind and you're part of our growing community, sub everybody up. Again, descriptions are in descriptions. Links are in
Links
the
are in the
description.
description below. Thank you. And don't forget to subscribe and like and comment and
Make sure
share.
you link the link.
Gunga have a hard time with words. But guys,
Hulk smash.
right? Until next time, keep it casual. Attention all, use channel sponsor Rogue Trader at theroguetraderutah.com and my code Keep It Casual for 10% off your comic cleaning and pressing needs. Remember, when submitting your books to be graded, use a trusted professional.